distinct privilege of introducing our keynote speaker. Caroll Spinney has spent half of his life inside the giant puppet, performing as Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch on Sesame Street since the show's inception in 1969. Prior to that, he performed on Bozo's Big Top right here in Boston for 10 years, was a commercial artist and animator, and served in the Air Force. Mr. Spinney has performed many times at the White House and starred in the movie Follow That Bird. He also won multiple awards, including 4 Emmys, 2 Grammys, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and the Library of Congress's Living Legend Award. More importantly, Mr. Spinney has brought joy to millions of children of all ages across the world. His love of children is exemplified in the humor, compassion, and kindness of the characters that he portrays. Mr. Spinney believes the same attitudes required of and often modeled by healthcare professionals must be instilled in children in order to develop the attitudes necessary to live happy and productive lives. This includes compassion, self-confidence, persistence, imagination, tolerance, curiosity, openness, respect, and humor, just to name a few. We are indeed honored that he is here with us today to share his bird's eye view on creating a culture of compassion. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker, Caroll Spinney.
On my way to, oh, I love trash. Anything, you're supposed to sing a sunny day. I don't want to. Don't tell me you're going to be grouchy. What else? Oh my gosh, look at all these people. There must be thousands, maybe hundreds, even dozens may be involved. Well, probably. But anyway, why don't you go, let me speak for a minute. Yeah, you'll take all day. Well, just get down a little bit. Will you? No. I'm a Grouch by trade. Wow, look at all those heads out there. They all got feet? Yes. How about the Christopher? What a voice. Yeah. Was he only about 10? I think so. Yeah, well, anyway, now what I wanted to talk about, wait a minute, Oscar, you just help, call a cop on me. Well, I've been awfully fortunate. I'm doing what I planned to do when I was a little boy. I discovered puppets in Waltham at the Green Acres School. I saw a puppet show about 1940, and I was amazed. They came out and bowed with little puppets on their hands, and I thought, how incredible that you can tell a story with puppets on the end of your hands. Little animated stuff things, you know. And I didn't dream it would get me all the way to Sesame Street. The song says, "Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street?" Well, I'd like to tell you how I got to Sesame Street. First, I started out with my puppets, and I gave a little puppet show with just 2 puppets. One I paid a nickel for at a rummage sale, and over down in South Acton, Massachusetts, which is about 25 miles west from here. And I put a little sign up, "Come see the puppet show." I built a theater out of spare parts and junk. And 16 people came, 2 cents a head. In 1942, 2 cents was good money. And I was 8 years old, and so I made 32 cents, and I said, I'm going to get rich. But then, of course, I ended up on PBS, and that's... I wouldn't change a thing. I started, my mother was from England. She used to see Punch and Judy shows as a little girl on Blackpool on the beach for a halfpenny. And so she built me for my next birthday, which is also Christmas, why I'm named Carol. And didn't work out as a kid, a boy named Sue. So she built me a Punch and Judy show at a theater with the help of my brother, who didn't like me very much, but he built a good theater. We still are friends, sort of. But he's a great guy. And I didn't realize, though, that that would get me all the way to Sesame Street. So I started doing puppet shows. My mother started writing shows and finally made me 70 puppets. I used to do birthday parties. Gradually it led to television. And I was doing a puppet show of my own after being on the air here in Boston for 9 years. Out in 1969, I was in Salt Lake City, where there was the Puppeteers of America. If anybody wants puppets, wants to be a puppeteer, I would recommend joining that. Puppeteers of America, find it on Google. And I was doing my own puppet show, and Jim Henson came backstage afterwards. And everything went wrong with my show. They put lighting on. I'm an animator too. I tried to work for Disney. They hired me, but I didn't stay because $56 a week is hardly a long one. He's famous for not paying much. And so I ended up back in Boston making animation. And I went to the Puppet Festival because I didn't really want to stay doing what I was doing. And I thought that maybe that might lead to something good. Well, Jim Henson, I built a very elaborate show. And Jim Henson came backstage afterwards. Everything had gone wrong during the show, except I was funny. I think funny helps, because he said, "I liked what you were trying to do." And I'm going to, I do the Muppets. I said, "I know." And they weren't that famous then, but he said, "Well, I've been hired by a new show. Have you heard about it, Sesame Street?" I said, "No, I hadn't heard." And he said, "Well, I'm going to build 2 new puppets that they want me to have every day on the show. Big Bird, I'm calling it Big Bird, and Oscar the Grouch. And I said, would you like to work for me?" And that's like saying, "Would you like to go to heaven?" And so I went down to New York to talk to him about it. And I finally said, I do have to ask the tough question, what will I get paid? And he said, "How's $200 a week?" In New York City. Even in 69, that's, I don't know. So he admitted that he was out of touch with what people should be paid because he was doing better than that. You know? And so I started doing the show. And it might be interesting to find how Sesame started. Briefly, I'll just say that Joan Gans Cooney was in television as a producer, just working her way up. But she saw a little boy in the inner city, and he was only about 3, and he was saying, "Man, don't wear off till the day wears on." And she thought, well, that boy learned it obviously from a commercial that was running on TV at the time. And she said, why don't we use television to teach? Because television gets into people's homes, and it would be nice if television could do more than just entertain, but also teach. So she started talking to people in the industry, and that led to Professor Jerry Lesser of Cambridge, just across the river. And he had studied children. Before his studies, the only studies they did to try to determine how children think, they used white rats. And he thought maybe children would be better to use, a more direct approach. And his study showed an awful lot of things about their attention span, various elements like that, and that was all considered in how they would put together a show. And the Muppets got included by one of the people who was invited. Some of the people who had worked with Captain Kangaroo, which was an excellent show, and they joined the group and created Sesame Street. So we all merged, and this was still a few months before Sesame went on the air. And so Jim did hire me, and he built the Bird and Oscar around me. And Big Bird is, you might wonder, one time I was trying, a rowdy crowd was waiting until I just finished Big Bird doing an appearance in a park, and I went into an enclosure, and I came back out, and they said, "Oh, that's him, grab him." And they kind of a rough crowd. And remember Frank Sinatra used to have his clothes ripped off by his fans, so they particularly want to get his bow tie. But feared for my life. And they said, next Big Bird. I said, do I look tall enough to be Big Bird? And they believed that. But he's tall because I was the smallest boy in my class. I tell you, there's a lot of satisfaction in being the tallest known character on television.
Hi, except for the dinosaurs.
And so that's how tall he is. And I have a very, very strong right arm. I can paint ceilings all day. I did this a lot of doctors in the audience. I had a lot of shoulder aches, even now. But it doesn't interfere with doing Big Bird. I was on CNN just 2 days ago as Big Bird, and I still have the job. And I'm hoping, I've done it 42 years, I hope to do it for 50. Well, Sesame Street goal is to provide parents. The goal of Sesame Street right from the start was to provide parents with the basic tools to help their children develop to their greatest potential. At the same time, they strive to instill in those children the sense of self-confidence, imagination, compassion, along with their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, and so many other things we learn to teach. We still do elements of life that children encounter, and we've never stopped producing, even though the ABCs have remained the same all those 42 years, and we expect them to stay similar. And well, they've changed a little bit in how you use them, thanks to. But I was so excited working on the show, and I didn't realize, though, that there's one thing that wasn't being taught, and that was compassion. So what happened was, to make me think of this, it was early December, and the snow had started to fall in New York. And we used to be a little theater on Broadway. Broadway! And that was thrilling. So I was walking back to the little tiny apartment I have, and there was an old man kind of moving along rather afraid, I guess, because of the icy thing. But Broadway at that time on the west side had an awful lot of drunks and things who would be bellowing at the world. And so we were accustomed to people just sleeping on the park benches, which are on the middle island of the Broadway up there. And so I just assumed maybe he was just another person overdone. And but then I started across the street. He was kind of standing, looking down at the curb, and I stopped and I said, I think he's afraid to step on down. And I walked over to him. I said, sir, do you need any help? And he said, well, I'm afraid that I'll slip, and there's no one to take care of me, and I live alone. And I said, well, would you take my arm? He said, oh, thank you. I walked a couple blocks with him, and he said, well, this is where I wrote the room. And I was wishing that I could have found that same place, because I was sleeping on people's couches, because the pay wasn't very good. And but then I thought, how silly I was. I just thought he was just another drunk. And that instead of realizing that he was a person who needed some help, and it didn't take much effort to help that man. And I thought, there's so many things we could do if we had a little more compassion to help people who need a hand up. And so the next morning I spoke to the producers and said, can we start teaching how to gain compassion? And they said, well, how are you going to teach that? And I realized that I guess it has to be demonstrated rather than urged or talked about. And so about 2 years later, I was reading a rundown on a magazine about the characters of Sesame Street, and they went through the human characters, Gordon and Susan and Maria, and all the people we love. And of course, they've changed through the years, since many of them had to leave due to the years. And but I realized Big Bird would have to demonstrate compassion somehow. And I didn't realize I was doing it, because reading this article, it came to the part about Big Bird. It said, and then there's the compassionate Big Bird. And it hit me like a million clapping hands and applause. I said, somehow I'm doing it. Whatever I'm doing, I must be doing something right. And it was very exciting to have that come true for what I wanted to do on the show. But researchers have found that there's a delicate balance of what works and what doesn't work with children. Mr. Hooper was a wonderful actor, Will Lee. He was the mentor to James Earl Jones. He was in the theater from the early 30s, and he joined us as an elderly man, a grandfatherly figure, if you will, on Sesame Street, running the shop and Hooper store. And he, I remember the last day, I could tell he wasn't well, but he didn't talk about it. And so it was just before Thanksgiving, so we were all leaving for a week off, and so he looked kind of purple. And I put my arm, I was in my bird feed because we had some scenes to do, and I put my arm around his shoulders. I said, "I love you, Mr. Hooper." And he said, "I love you, Carol." And those were our last words. 3 days later, he died. He was that ill, but he still loved Sesame Street so much he never even brought it up. He just worked even though he didn't feel right. But another thing we had that we tried, because everything was tested on Sesame Street, even now, if it's a new thing, we'll run before children of 4 and under to see how they react. Can they understand it? Does it mean something? Well, Marty Robinson plays Mr. Snuffleupagus, who
I know as my pal Snuffy.
and he is a very funny man. I know if he's on the list, I'm going to have a lot of laughs that day, because we do a lot of clowning on air and off the air too. So it's a funny set where we tape. But he was 9. His parents got divorced, and it was very crushing to him. And he said, since Snuffy lived in a cave with his mother and father, who we rarely saw, they put a wig on, put a mustache on. How do you put a mustache on Snuffy? But he has his elephant trunk, sort of. But anyway, they put a wig on another. They have 2 Snuffies, so there can be more than one on the screen. And so he helped write a story with the writers about divorce, so the children, because about 1/3 of the children know what it's like to have divorced parents. And so the story was beautifully done. And part of it was, though, that Snuffy cried when he said, my mommy and daddy are getting divorced, and I think it's my fault. Because they covered lots of, during divorce, a lot of children think that they contributed to this breakup. And all of that was covered. But at the end is a happy ending where he understands. His father said, we love you, you did nothing to do with, Daddy just can't be together, but we both love you just as much. And I'm going to have a lot of fun with you. I'm going to make time to be just with you, Snuffy. And so it was a nice story, and beautifully done, but we tested it. And children were still crying at the end of the show. And it just is too early to explain it to them. And so they never showed it. And I think that one of Mr. Hooper's death, because on his death story, Big Bird has drawn, Big Bird, I'm a cartoonist, so I drew all my own artwork for Big Bird, but I drew rather well for a 6-year-old bird. He had brought drawings in to give to all the characters of the show, and the scene went like this. All the characters, the human characters were there. There were 8 then. And he has drawn a picture from each of them, and Luis and all the people. And they said, "Well, where's Mr. Hooper? Because I want to give him his." And they said, "Well, don't you understand? We told you that Mr. Hooper died." He said, "I know, but when's he coming back?" They said, "Well, Big Bird, when people die, they don't come back." I said, "Never?" "No, they can't come back. But we'll remember it." "But that's so sad." And it was sad. And, there were tears on all the actors' face. The thing that we saw on TV, it was all the first take, because it was all from our hearts. And that was, I think, probably one of the greatest shows we've ever done. That was way back in 1984. And so, and now we're doing things like this. There's been an awful lot of notice about bullying. I was bullied when I was in school, and I know what it's like from deep in my heart. It hurt. And I was teased. I had puppets. I was playing with dolls. I was a very small child, smallest boy in the class. Which can't tell you how satisfying it is to be 8 feet 2. And so bullying has become a widespread problem. So our message, we just did a wonderful script about Big Bird being bullied. And he isn't even aware he's being bullied by, he just thought he wasn't quite good enough to join this good bird club. And he tried everything to please them, but there was no pleasing them at all, and he really felt terrible. That show will be shown on Monday this coming week on the live version of Sesame Street. A lot of places repeat it, so it should be on all day. It depends on the city. Look at your local thing. But it's I think it's one of the greatest scripts we've done in years, and I think it's one we'll remember a long time. So the thing is that children think that there's something wrong when they're being bullied, and they really should go to try to find a caring adult that might have some way to either deal with the bully because the child just can't solve this problem, I can assure you. So the important thing is, and we emphasize that in the story on Monday, they have to realize they've done nothing wrong. Most importantly, those who are bullied have to learn to be happy, to be just who they are. I have a clock here. I should have to. I have had some wonderful moments with children. An awful lot of children with autism have come to notice in this world, as you know, and I've dealt with an awful lot of them. The first I don't know if it's anything related to aphasia. I used to play a character in Boston here called Mr. Lion, and I did a cartoon bit. I'd take a child's name and write it on a big drawing board, and then while the children counted 30, I would make it into an animal face. And so I had done a whole bunch on stage over in native, and I would hold up for the audience, and then I chose another child. And so I saw this little boy in front, I said, "You, what you got?" And his father put him up on the portable stage in the parking lot. And he said, the father yelled, "His name is Tommy." So I drew Tommy on, and I made it into a lion, and I was dressed as a lion, a suit my mother built for me. And really wonderful costume. And he held, after I tore it off and handed it to the child after we showed it to the audience, and the boy said, "Lion!" And his father, he almost fell over. I wondered why I thought he was just excited that his child was chosen to get one of the drawings. Only 5 kids got one out of a couple hundred. So he spoke to me after I changed my old Volkswagen bus, got into my normal clothes, and I stepped out. He said, "Are you the guy who plays the lion?" I said, "Yes." He said, "But that was," when he said lion, that was the first word that Tommy, who was 7, had ever spoken. And I said, "Oh, really? Did he have aphasia?" And he said, "Well, how would you know that?" I said, "Just happened to read Reader's Digest." And 2 years later, I went to that town to open as Mr. Lion, and it was in the paper apparently, in Natick. And the children, I'm just giving away a free picture and shake their hands. And this handsome boy comes along and he says, "Do you remember me, Mr. Lion? I'm Tommy." And I said, "Are you?" And his father says, "This is the boy with aphasia." And he said, "When we went home, he showed it to his mother." And he said, I said, tell Mommy what it is. He said, "Lion." And she burst into joyous tears. And that was my first step of trying to learn. I've done an awful lot I've gotten some awards from aphasia groups because we've had an awful lot of children somehow reach, and I've been the focus of some of them. There's 2 I correspond with. One is a 15-year-old boy who has cerebral palsy as well as autism, but he's doing very well. He writes nice letters. And then a little girl who is 7 named Shelby in Iowa, who I met when she centered on me because they can focus very well. And she focused on me, so we arranged a thing where I could meet her. When I walked into the room, she's there, she's in a little pink dress, and she sees me and goes, "Wow!" It was very satisfying. A lot of children write in, and they love to say, "Big Bird, you're my friend. Why don't you come over and play with me? How about Thursday?" In other words, I just got bunk beds. Why don't you come and stay with me? You can have the top. But there's one, I got a letter, I'll make it very brief, I say my time is 2.5 minutes. I got a letter from a man who said his boy was in the hospital. And he hasn't smiled for months because he's only 5, he knew he was dying, he had cancer. Could I phone him. Maybe it would cheer him up. So I called him, and I got him on the phone, and he was in bed, and I said, "Hi, Joey, this is Big Bird." And I started talking to him, Mr. Lion, that's my other character. And I talked to him for a while, and then I said, well, I'll let you rest, but you've been a brave boy, and it's so nice to have a chance to talk to you. Bye, Joey. And I got a letter the next week from his father, and they were sitting with him when I called, because the letter had taken a while to get to me through the offices. And so he thought I was going to call, and it turned out it was his last day. And so he said that when he hung up the phone, he said, "That was Big Bird. He's my friend." And he smiled. And he died. But I thought, what a blessing to be able to have a job where I could at least bring a smile. And he hadn't smiled in months. And the last thing they saw of their little Joey was that he was smiling. And I used to think I would like to be a doctor when I was a young child. But I would see pictures of an operation or something, and I fainted looking at it. Just looking at a picture. And so I realized that wasn't going to be my route. But I'm so pleased that I could be more than just a teacher to children, thanks to Sesame Street, but also do, I guess the heart needs some healing too. So I'm pleased to have this opportunity. So I was so truly blessed the day Jim gave me Big Bird and Oscar to play. I guess it's that all of us here have the ability, the chance to make a difference in people's lives. You have to encourage them to live healthy and happy, most of all, to follow their dreams. I did. Oscar?
I'd say thank you, except Grouches never say thanks.
Oscar, you're very rude.
I know.
I want to say thank you. I'd like to thank the Academy for inviting me to be here. This is my old hometown, and it's so wonderful to have such an audience. I've talked to pediatric groups before, and
You're my favorite audience.
do you have something favorite?
Other than trash, yes. I love trash. Anything.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.